What is an RTD? First off, RTD stands for Roundtable Discussion. It's a videotape panel discussion hosted by doremicom, co-hosted by Solid Smurf, where we take a wargaming topic, force the panel to analyze wargaming trends, force the panel to answer at least 6 questions, then ask them to make an outlandish prediction about the future. Oh, and I forgot to mention the most difficult thing. Take away the round table, force them to use video chat software that rarely works, and be entertaining. The Roundtable Discussion, bringing the what to wargaming.
Okay, welcome back to doremicom channel. We're here with the RTD. Age of Sigmar officially released on July 11, 2015, which happens to be today, although you won't be seeing this today. Won't be seeing this on the 11th. Has been caught up in a wave of controversy by Games Workshop fantasy fans. In a surprising change of course, Games Workshop has released a rule set for a tabletop game that is neither designed for large scale, where the focus is more on skirmish level, nor is it designed to be in a competitive space. Better mustaches allowing rerolls for the win. And it is official that GW will be attending GenCon this year. Also at GenCon this year, Corvus Belli is releasing a super starter pack for the new faction USAriadna, a future America force. This is a follow-up into the incredible popular 2-player Operation Ice Storm that they released at GenCon last year. In this RTD, we'll be taking a deeper dive looking into both Age of Sigmar and USAriadna and conclude with predictions for GenCon. With me today are my panel, John from Lords of the Old World, co-host Solid Smurf.
What up?
And Tim from Cool Mini or Not.
How's it going, guys?
All right, question number 1. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being duh, and 10 being a more extreme WTF, how surprising is it that GW has more fantasy into the rule set we know as Age of Sigmar? And to start this off, we're gonna start off with our co-host Solid Smurf.
Okay, I give this one a 9. This is extreme WTF because really they took a game for a hardcore strategist and then they put water wings on him and beat him with a pool noodle. I mean, they dumbed it down so far they insulted their fan base.
All right, let's move on to John.
I gave this one a goose egg.
So the lowest you can do is 1, right?
Going below that scale. All right, so a 1 then, right? When GW officially releases that their fantasy sales make up between 8 and 12% of their gross income, something has to change. Either they drop the line entirely or it's something new. This was a no-brainer.
All right. Tim, what's your thoughts?
I actually have to agree with John on that one. You know, just looking at it from a business standpoint, if, you know, fantasy is as long going and as loved as it is, if it's not working monetarily for them, they got to do something about it. So, probably about a 3.
Okay. I actually gave this just quite a bit higher than John and Tim, but not quite as extreme as Smurf. And I ended up giving this at about a 7. And the real reason is that we haven't seen this from GW. We have not seen a retreat to smaller game spaces for their core line. Their core line being Warhammer Fantasy Battle and 40K. Their side games I'm excluding from this conversation. We also haven't seen them taking a bit of a lighthearted approach. And this really kind of boils down probably from what perspective we're talking about, because John and Tim really talked about it more from a GW perspective. I think Smurf and I approached it from the player perspective. I'm going to open up the floor now, and let's have some more discussion about it. Anyone can jump in.
Okay, well I'm gonna agree. I definitely took it from a player perspective, you know, and what is a company without its players? So I agree it needed a revamp, but I think what they did to Age of Sigmar with it is an insult to the player. Yeah, someone who's not a fantasy player, I'm insulted. I mean,
I don't know that I would go. I don't know that I would go insulted, but I will say that I've gotten in a game of Age of Sigmar, and I have to speak from my experience. I have played a grand total of 2 actual fantasy Warhammer battle games prior to Age of Sigmar, where So I'm not a veteran, nor do I own models. So I wasn't taking offense. I was actually more surprised I actually am shocked that the company would allow that to occur. John, why don't you add some more thoughts in here?
I don't know. I mean, people are going crazy about it and being like, "Oh, you insulted the fan base," but people played 7th edition, they played 6th edition, and then that was their army, and they never bought anything. That was the problem with Fantasy, is you say the player base was upset. There was no player base. When you go to a GT, as I do, and every GT you go to up and down the East Coast has the same 50 players, there's a problem with your game. That's become from a game to a cult following. Like, when... And I kid you not, you go and look at the GT tournament standings, and its top 7 people are the same people up and down the East Coast. There was nobody playing Fantasy. My local game store sold more things with the Fantasy logo on it in the last 2 weeks than he did in the last 6 months. So if that says anything about the game, GW isn't pissing anybody off, because the people who are pissed off are less than 1% of their target market right now.
Okay, yeah. Tim, extra thoughts?
Again, I have to agree with John. I mean, as much as I understand people want those grand games where they want to have the movement trays, they want to have that, massive battle feeling, at the end of the day, nobody was buying models. I mean, I've got 3 armies right now that are still sitting in, boxes I haven't unpacked yet that I haven't bought models for Fantasy for at least 3 years at this point. So, as far as GW getting my money and continuing the game, it's non-existent.
Okay.
Are you going to pick up anything from Age of Sigmar?
If anything, Age of Sigmar to me, I'm looking at it as like a potential to revamp back into Mordheim. When I'm a huge skirmish game player, I love Mordheim. If we see more of that, yeah, I'll probably end up buying some more Skaven or vampires and making like more smaller Mordheim style bands. That to me,
their business model worked. Because if you buy 2 boxes of 10 guys, that's $70 in sales that they didn't make.
Exactly.
Okay, but I'm going to piggy back off that, but I'm going to wait until question 3.
Okay, so let me go ahead and stop the conversation at this point. Let's go ahead and move on to question number 2. 2 different answers are expected here. Okay, in a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being a bad idea, 10 being the best decision GW has made since hiring Relic to design Dawn of War, and anyone who thinks that was a bad idea, you are probably weren't around at the time to play that game. Was the removal of the competitive focus for A, new players, and B, veterans of Fantasy, evaluate that? And this time we're going to start with John.
Okay. So this was kind of a trick question for me because, again, Age of Sigmar isn't designed for the veterans. This is designed to get new people in. The veterans don't spend money anymore. So GW just, to them, they want new people in. So as far as changing it from a non-competitive standpoint for new players, it's the best case scenario. It's a 10. They couldn't have chosen a better way to go with the game. And then for veteran players, I mean, I probably personally have $7,000 in fantasy armies. I played since 6th edition, and I still love the game. So maybe a 5, middle of the road.
Okay. Tim, what's your thoughts?
You'll have to come back to me on that one. I'll have to gather them a little bit more.
All right. We don't normally do that, but Smurf,
okay.
You go.
I gave this 8 for everyone. So when you bar entry to a game because you have such hardcore players, like what John was saying, the same 7 people, if I saw that, I'd be like, I don't want to do that. And what they did is they opened it up for casual people to play. They made it easier for entry, and they also are trying to cultivate a good time. I fully support both of these things, so a solid 8. I do want to preference that with I'm a filthy casual, so that it definitely when it came out, it interested me. So I think it was a really good move for them to attempt to draw new players off of a new rule system and new models.
All right, Tim, you ready?
Yeah, so for new players, I'd definitely give it about a 7 or an 8. For veterans, it's so hard to say. I mean, you're going to have the people that are going to just keep playing it anyway, so it's hard for me to rate that one. So 5. It's hard to say. I've got so many mixed emotions on both sides of that fence with the way that they did it that it's really hard for me to give it just like solid numbers based on what's it doing for casuals, what's it doing for veterans.
We'll keep that in mind because when we open up the floor for expanded discussion, I want you to go into what those things are.
Sure.
All right. So the way I look at it from a new player perspective, it's a straight up 10. Games Workshop pulled a Wii, okay? The reason Nintendo Wii was so popular, and anyone who's like, it's not a real game console, you need to go look at the money Nintendo made, okay? The reason Nintendo was so successful with the Wii is that they opened the door and said, all you people that we have never catered to, come on in and take a look. Now, in the end, it's only going to... The sales numbers for Age of Sigmar are going to, in my mind, dictate whether or not it was a success for veterans. Because the bottom line is, if I'm a veteran player of a game that's dying, then I can literally start watching the game fade into dust. Okay? So should GW be successful with Age of Sigmar, for veterans, I would say it has to be, again, a 10. Because you need new lifeblood. You cannot sustain with where you're at. If they are not successful, then unfortunately you're falling back to about probably in the realm of a 3 for veterans. And I know that's kind of unfair that I gave 2 answers and probably the speculation on what Tim was going to say, but really it really is difficult for the veteran perspective. If you're a veteran and your game is dying, you should be, what can we do at all to get that, to make my miniatures not seem completely worthless? And with that, we're going to open up the discussion, and let's go back to Tim, who was a little shy at the beginning.
Well, it's not a matter of being shy. It's just so I've had this discussion with a couple of people that I work with, and understand some of this is coming from a professional level. Some of it is coming from the perspective of somebody who's never walked into a game store, or they're going into a game store for the first time. If you're going into a game store for the first time and see some people playing with miniatures and they're having fun rolling dice, it may seem a little odd to you at first, but at the end of the day, you understand it's a game. These are grown men playing with toy soldiers at the end of the day. Let's look at it for what it really is. Now, with the way the gaming industry is going, and a lot of, moms are the ones that are spending money, and a lot of these game stores are starting to open up to be more family-style game stores. If you're to go into that same game store and take Age of Sigmar, and you're watching grown men ride around the store on imaginary horses and talking to them, or winning arguments because of the fact they have grander mustaches, or bending down and speaking to their miniatures, what message is that conveying to hopefully getting new players into a game, especially at a younger age when it's the mom or dad that has no idea what any of this is spending that money? Now they're going, I don't want my kids coming back to these creepers.
Okay.
So you're perpetuating that cycle of chasing gamers back to the basement because you're closing down the game stores because you're making them look weird.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tricky. I will tell you right now, I had a very hard time finding anyone. This was like the grand release that came out with a puff of smoke. I went to 5 game stores today looking for Age of Sigmar demos so that I could talk intelligently at this RTD, and none of them, with the exception of an actually GW branded store, had anything but massive Magic the Gathering stuff going on, which I got to tell you, GW, if you are no longer in the space that when your game comes out, it defaults away from everything else. You really got to be way more aware of when things are going to become available.
Okay, to be fair, today was the MTG core set. A lot of stores have been popping up that are Magic shops, and if they do not cater to Magic players, they fail. So they have to push Magic. It was a stupid idea to release this game this weekend. Last weekend, we had 47 people come in and demo the game. Today, I made 4 people who have never played a GW game drop at least $400 each today.
Now, we went to a game store today, and they had a copy, a singular Age of Sigmar.
Was it a Magic store?
No, it's they have Infinity, they have the Wrath of Kings, they have everything.
Do they cater to Magic players? How many Magic players were there today?
Under a dozen.
Okay.
Yeah. They were really hyped for the Dragon Ball Z release.
Oh.
Okay.
Right?
Moving on.
Super excited. Anyways, yeah. I'm not saying again. I'm not saying that anything other than GW needs to wake up and realize that other games get released, and when it's something really major, and that they just needed to be smart about when they released it. Because, John, unfortunately, you know, in order for you to be a game store that you were demoing the week earlier, didn't you have to drop quite a bit of money to make that happen?
Yeah, about 5G.
Yeah, so you know, again, going back to, I don't mind Magic the Gathering players because they keep my store afloat when I'm not there. In fact, I really appreciate what they do, and I try not to get too upset when I really want to run an Infinity tournament or the Lake during a state event. Whew, so hard to organize around. I contacted the stores yesterday going, can anyone in your store set up an Age of Sigmar demo? And the everyone said pretty much no. And of the non-GW stores, only one had it in stock. You could order it from everywhere, but we only had one store in this area that had it in stock, and there were only 5 copies. Everything else was blank, and other than the GW store, and a huge shout out. I don't even know if they'll figure this out, but the guy who I went to the GW store and demoed with, super nice guy. Thank you so much for taking the time to run through the game.
And that being said, locally, I know there's 3 major game stores in the area, not counting card shops because I think they're a scum, and honestly they are a detriment to the community. But there's 3 major game shops. One of them is not carrying Age of Sigmar. They're dropping their entire product line just to focus on Magic. The other one only ordered in 4 copies, and George ordered in 80, and he's sold 36 so far. So...
And that's impressive, but I also got to say, the Northeast, for whatever reason, has been a lifeline for GW for many years. So I don't know if it's an area thing, right? Like, if you have a lot of people that are invested in the Games Workshop world, it's easier to kind of keep that ball rolling, I would say.
Yeah, no, it's
Would you
definitely
agree, John?
regional. And specifically where you live, Brawler's Bash is right next to you. And that's die-hard tournament players who do not want what Age of Sigmar is. So.
Yeah. I actually posted on a forum, and those guys are usually like Johnny on the spot with responses, and they were like, "No."
We have something called the Shambling Horde up here, and people are up in arms about this game. Surprisingly, I knew about 6 or 7 of them that came in today to demo, and they all slumped out with their copy of Age of Sigmar. So,
well,
it is getting a couple people.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, breaking down barriers and walls, I'm sure, is going to help them in the long run. So let's move on to question number 3. Using the same scale from the last question, 1 extreme bad, 10 extreme good, was it a good idea for GW to shrink the 8th edition 180 pages of rules into 4 pages?
That are free.
That are free, which is another thing for the company. Let's start with Tim.
Shrinking the rules into 4 pages, not a good idea. If anything that I've learned over the years, just from playing various miniatures games, players need rules. Otherwise, they just start finding all the loopholes and just turns into utter anarchy on the table. And we might as well just break out plastic army men and just say, hey, I shot you, and then have an argument over whether or not I shot you or not. So
do us the favor, Tim, and give us a number first.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Probably a 6.
Okay. Well, that's still on the good side.
Yeah, I mean, streamlining rules is a good thing, but at the same time, I don't know if taking that much content and jamming it down into 4 pages was a great idea. So I'm on the fence.
Okay, Smurf, your turn.
I give it a -3. Like, hell no, this was not a good idea. It's what Tim is saying. We have to have structure. We need rules. Already, people are breaking the game in the stupidest of ways, and I'm including War Scrolls in the rules here because if you look, the rules for the units are on those War Scrolls. They just divided it out, so it's more than 4 pages. If you add it all, it's a whole bunch. But then there's no points, there's no balance. It's shenanigans. All of it. And these youngsters don't know what they're doing.
Well, I have to admit, I got my page count from John, who's about to go up. He's on the mound right now. And John, was 180 pages? Did that include any of the Army books?
No, that was core rules only.
So again, this is 180 pages of core rules down to 4 pages of rules. John, go ahead and give your answer.
I was just about to say, I mean, the core rules being 4 pages, I could see where, I mean, I've played probably, including today, I've probably played about 65 games at Age of Sigmar since last week. So my pool, I'm assuming, is 60 times more than most of you guys right now. The game is way more in depth. Way more in depth than 4 pages lends itself. And, I mean, the problem does come in with shenanigans and stuff like that, but if you're playing against somebody who's not a tool bag, it's not a problem.
John, give us a number.
I'm going to go with a 7. I like the rules being condensed down from 180 pages, where somebody who's been playing for literally 5 years of 8th edition still has to go look up rules every once in a while, to being 4 pages. I feel like they could have made it a little bit more in-depth, though.
All right, so let me talk to you guys from a GenCon demo person perspective. GW's view on this should be that it was a 10. It was extremely good. Why? Because the bottom line is, at GenCon, in the vendor space, since they're attending, there is no way, if I have 180 pages of reasonable sets of rules in order to go through and explain to someone what a game is, you know how many new people I'm going to get to play at GenCon? 0. People want like 10, 15-minute demos, and then they move on to the next thing. It's too much eye candy everywhere. You're never going to get traction. If you can gauge it and at least focus even down to 20 minutes to get a reasonable sense of the game in, it's brilliant on their part. Now, that being said, I don't think it's balanced per se. And I think where the issue is going to come into play, not from the competitive players per se, but just general players getting a sense, and even John has kind of gone through on his YouTube channel into trying to explain to help reduce some of the min-maxing that occurs within Age of Sigmar. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor. But again, no, even with all the nonsensical stuff, I think if you play with a bad player playing miniatures game, no matter what game you're playing, the game's going to suck for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm starting with that premise, and that's why I'm giving the evaluation of a 10. I'm going to open up the floor though, and does anyone? I want to go back to Smurf first for the continued discussion, because I'm really confused how he could give that this change of everything over to like an 8 for new players, and this is a -3. That confuses me.
Right. So it's all about. Okay. So here's the thing. Kit, let's talk about the pickup game. The pug, you don't know who he is. You're just walking in to play the game, and you're super excited. You're like, this guy's got a hammer. He's got a big shield. He's gonna beat something. It'll be awesome. And then you walk in, and there's a guy who has You know, he's like, do you want to play a game? And you're like, I would love to play a game. I want to get into this. This looks like, he goes, I'll let you play with some of my models. And you're like, awesome, I'm going to play a game. And he gets it out, and he's setting it all up, and you're like, little plastic figures is going to rock. We got dice. It's going to be amazing. And then he pulls out a single figure, and you're like, what is that? What's going on? And you're confused, and you don't know what's happening. Right now, you have that excitement. You have that excitement with that new player. Then Doug, who's been playing the game for much, much longer, just steamrollers the new kid because of rules loopholes, because there's no point balance, because there's nothing like that. That's going to crush that new player, and he's never going to want to touch it again. You have the
if that's your game story, you have a much, much bigger problem.
Right, but we would see that. I have been seeing that ever since I've been wargaming. You would always have that guy. And you would always have rules lawyers. You would always have people who would min-max and break. And yes, I agree the game is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be, enjoyable. What this has done is it's made it to where I only want to play with the people I know. I'm far less willing to go out and do a pickup game. That's not going to put me inside of a game store. That's going to lose sales.
Yeah, I can see that. It really does kind of focus on whose responsibility is it that the game is balanced or free of loopholes. And I will tell you right now, Corvus Belli, when they went from 2nd to 3rd edition, that was their focus, was to reduce the ambiguity of rules, which I think does help. But Infinity is also a way more complicated game now than Age of Sigmar is, or complicated is the wrong word, in-depth, I would say. John, continue thoughts on your part?
I'm going to say that the game has been out for 9 hours. 9 hours.
Well, but John, this is the reason I want to ask you about it, right? Because you've had it for way more than 9 hours.
Okay. Can I disagree with that 9 hours? Because the rules and the army sheets have been out longer than that on the website. They've been out for about a week now.
But the game came out today.
That was but if you had the figures, you could go online, print off the rule book, print off your war scrolls, and you could play. I don't consider this a launch today. It launched back on the 4th.
Okay.
Today's the day that the official boxes came out.
Smurf, have you played the game yet?
No, I haven't touched. I don't want to.
Okay, that's a huge problem. I've played the game 60 plus times. I've seen an army of 15 dwarves win against 180 Skaven with a Doom Bell and a Vermin Lord.
Right. But I've seen the game
sudden death scenarios. There's ways the game balances out.
Right, but I've also seen this sudden death, and I've talked to players, I've read stuff. It's not like I'm going into this with a blind eye. And at the end, I'm going to defend this with play whatever makes you happy. I don't care. This is just my opinion. And if you get your rocks off doing it, that's good. They're talking about how you take, like Nagash, and you sudden death to where you have to be the only one alive on the last turn, and then you just summon zombies and create a wall, and you tarp it. That doesn't sound fun to me.
But you can't do that.
Why can't you do that?
Everybody is doing these broken bullshit things. You can't do these things. The people are saying, oh, you give each other 1+ armor saves. You can only cast this one spell once per turn. You can't summon anything unless you bring it with you already.
Okay,
so if you bring 100 zombies, you can summon 100 zombies, but then you're not outnumbering them.
Okay, so let's back up. Well, you agreed on me on this one. You can take, there's a Skaven rule, and there's also a Tzeentchian character that you can take in the same thing. And we talked about this, and you agreed with me on it. You can modify
I did not agree with you.
Okay, hold on.
This is the way it's written. You can't modify a 6-sided die to be anything other than a 6.
It doesn't say modify.
Okay, wait a minute. Stop, guys. Stop. You guys are getting way too...
Smurf is just pulling up nitpicking things that people are bitching
No. John, to be fair, I've heard these kinds of arguments from veterans of the game as well. So and I understand. Just give me a second to finish, okay?
Don't read the rules.
John.
Okay, go ahead. Yep, go ahead.
Give me a second to finish, okay? So I'm going to say, understand that yes, I didn't expect anyone here to have this much of a care about this topic, quite honestly. I mean, with the exception of John, I don't know any one of us that actually plays it hardcore. And I say hardcore because, as John admitted, he played 60 games of Age of Sigmar, and it's only been out for effectively a week in his world, right? So without taking down Smurf, address the concerns that Smurf brought up, and consider that you're addressing honestly a larger audience of players, right? Because I mean, while I was there, I was watching and if there's a confusion here, then I will say that this confusion of the number count for the sudden death rules are widespread, and even GW employees might not realize it, because I listened, and maybe they weren't actually running the game, but in the Games Workshop store, I was watching while two people who brought guys who could summon immediately called for sudden death with 2 war scrolls against 2 other, it was Skaven armies where they had, you know, massive clan rat formations, and 2 guys that were these like kind of big dudes who could summon things, and they would be summoning stuff all over the place. So understand that it's a widely misunderstood rule from more than just people who haven't played. Now address that concern, okay?
Okay. So again, summoning, you can only summon if you take the war scroll that unlocks the spell. So if you want to take zombies, you have to take the minimum 20 squad of zombies to begin with, which means you can never be outnumbered if your opponent wants it. Straight up. That's the way around being outnumbered for summoning. It's the same with the lizard and the tomb kings. Somebody came in today and said that they watched as Nagash and one of his Mortarks bounced shield spells off of each other because they're each allowed to cast 6 spells each turn, and got to a 1+ save, which there's nothing in the rules that say a 1 fails, and you effectively can't kill them. But on page 4, under spells, it says you can only cast the spell once, so you can't do that. Like, all of these complaints and whinings, if you read the 4 pages of rules, it says you can't do these things. And then as far as the Screaming Bell and the Lord of Change, you can't change a 6-sided dice to be anything other than a 6. That's common sense.
Okay.
And on top of that, the GW employees said that all of these fluffy rules are not going to be carried on into future releases. This is a send-off to the 8th edition armies, and when they re-release the Empire as their new army, all of these rules are getting completely deleted. So
I wonder if that will mean that you can't then take the particular war scrolls or miniatures that have those fluffy rules, which is so
probably
GW for another wave of, you know, veterans going, back in my day. Tim, any follow-on thoughts you got, or should we move on?
Yeah, so I can think of another game that doesn't actually have point costs to a game. Just saying. But anyway, the only concern I have with it is that I understand they want people to have the same amount of models on each side. But I look at it from the standpoint: how does 4 clan rats stand up against 4 greater demons? Like, how does that balance out? I don't. And again, this is coming from somebody who has not really looked at it in depth, so I don't understand it. But I'm even looking at it from a cost standpoint that, you know, again, I bought a box of clan rats. That cost me $40, $50. I'm not quite sure what they're running at the moment, but I know those demons alone. I mean, the last time I remember looking at a demon kit, it was like $60 for 1 demon. So again, $240. Well, keep in mind, that's not the big ones. That's just the smaller ones. I can't remember what the heck they're called at this point. But again, I'm going off of prices I've seen in the past because I haven't bought anything for a while. So I guess that's where I look at it from the standpoint of, well, how is that fair?
And I'm saying if I have 2 new players and they don't know any better, okay? I'm not saying a new player and a veteran player and they're not playing it right and you have to deal with douchebaggery, okay? I'm saying 2 brand new players and they just don't know, right? That to me is the only thing that's not fully understood, and it's not like GW has ever been, hey, we are the company that creates balanced games.
The notion of not having points, I think, intimidates everybody. And honestly, after about a week of thinking on it, I think playing rules as is the only way to play the game. The only demos that I've run are with the box for Age of Sigmar, though. And the way that they make the scenarios, the game is fairly well even matched. I'd say there are about 50% win rates on both sides.
Okay, I actually had a follow-on question for this, for question number 3. I don't know if we've kind of reached a limit, though, of how much we're going to be able to put into one episode. I guess I'll throw this out there, but understand we might cut this particular question out if it ends up running long. Okay.
Can I jump in real quick?
Sure.
So I want to also preference that my answer to question 3 is from the answer of are 4 pages a good idea. That's all it was based off of.
So in your mind, you're thinking 8 is the right number.
Actually, I put down 6 in my answer, but, but that's all it was based off of. I think we need more rules to keep.
Okay,
we're
good. I think we understand, Smurf. It's okay.
My 9-hour to a week-long release point that got totally diverted is this is going to be a living rule set. This has already been completely confirmed by GW. So there is nothing to stop them that, oh, look, giants are way too strong. Let's reduce their wounds by 4 and see what happens. And in 6 weeks, there'll be a new war scroll with giants having 8 wounds instead of 12. The rule sets are going to be a breathing rule system. So
okay, stop, John, because this leads in beautifully to my next question, okay, the follow-on. Let's go ahead and ask it. Was it a good idea that GW released the rule set, A, ahead of the official release, and B, for free? Okay? And with that, let's go ahead and we're going to go back to Solid Smurf.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Was it a good idea that GW released the rule set ahead of time and for free?
Yes, I think that's a great idea. Saved me money.
Okay. John.
Of course it's a good idea. If they're free rules online, it costs GW nothing to print books. So if they want to update, and that's the biggest gripe, is, oh, look, I bought the Space Marine Codex, and because GW has a secretive release schedule, which sucks, 3 weeks from now, my book is obsolete. Now that's no longer an issue. These War Scrolls will update for free, and you will never be screwed over. So that's a no-brainer. And then as far as releasing it before the box comes out, again, it's so that people with existing armies can sink their teeth in, and they can start getting feedback immediately.
Yep.
So that hopefully they can make changes to the game.
Tim, your thoughts?
It's a great idea on both parts. I mean, GW is finally stepping into the realm of, a lot of modern companies. I mean, we release rules online for free. We update stat cards and everything for free online whenever we feel that something balanced needs to happen. It's the way that games are moving. Spending money on books has now become something that's optional as a standard, and GW is finally stepping up to the plate on that. So.
Yeah, I will actually agree. I just wish that GW would have had the forethought to do it even a little bit more, like even another week ahead of time, to really engage people with the understanding that this is a living rule set by simply stating we're releasing these rules early because we're intending on changing the rules, and effectively what you're doing is beta testing the game for us. When I look at how the Age of Sigmar box is set up, it's brilliant, it's well formulated, it's story driven, and really gives you a sense of a progressive story as you go from mission to mission, and it's brilliant the way that they put it out. That being said, with what kind of in conjunction with what John was saying, people really need to understand that it truly is a living rule set, that it isn't set in stone, and that their intention is to balance it, because right now everything that you hear or see is them going, yeah, this is just for fun, not, yeah, we're trying to balance it. That's my take on it. Do you guys have any extra thoughts before we conclude this side?
I hate GW's company policies. Absolutely hate them. I love their games, but them having a secretive release schedule and the fact that you have to dig to know that this is a living rule system is atrocious.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have to agree with you on that one.
I had no idea it was living, to be honest.
Exactly, and that's the problem. Everybody's up in arms about this, and they have confirmed that they will be adjusting it based on player complaints. I don't know what else to say about that.
Yeah, I just, but to some degree,
on their website is a huge problem.
All right, John, we can't keep stepping on each other. I agree with everything you just said. It really does scream, though, that they needed people to understand that the rule system beyond the Age of Sigmar box was not fully baked. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing, right? You can have a game that has to go through some bumps and bruises and basically throw up your hands and go, look, we can't figure a way to fully balance it. We need your guys' help. Privateer Press did it even before Mark II came out, but the people knew ahead of time that that's what was going on, and they also made sure that when they were making that switch over, that it was well comprehended, that it was a beta test, that people had 3 months to goof around and give feedback to the system. Anything else before we jet? Nope. Okay. Fantastic. This is the end of part 1.